With the U.S. threatening to raise tariffs, Korean trade officials are stepping up efforts to address the issue. Industry Minister Kim Jong-wan held talks with U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, while Trade Minister Yo Han-gu is set to arrive later to meet U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer. South Korea remains on the United States foreign exchange monitoring list for heightened attention over macroeconomic and exchange rate policies. This comes after the country was removed from the list in 2023, but was put back on it in November 2024. Interim CEO of Coupang, Rogers, is set to appear for police questioning later this afternoon. Police are expected to question him about Coupang's probe into the massive customer data breach at the company and examine whether there were attempts to destroy evidence. Hello and thanks for joining us on Arirang News. With the risk of higher U.S. tariffs back on the table, South Korea's trade leadership is stepping up high-level talks in Washington as fresh comments from President Donald Trump set the stage for intensive trade talks. Our Moon Hye-ryun starts us off.
South Korea's top trade officials are mounting an urgent diplomatic push in Washington as the Trump administration signals it may reinstate steep tariffs on Korean goods. Industry Minister Kim Jong-wan met U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick on Thursday local time, though the two sides failed to reach an immediate agreement. Trade Minister Yo Han-gu will arrive later to meet U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, forming a coordinated response by Korea's trade leadership. The tariff threat appears to stem from U.S. frustration over delays in South Korea's domestic legislation, tied to last year's trade deal and a $350 billion investment pledge. Minister Kim arrived at the Commerce Department around 5 p.m. and left about an hour and a half later, telling reporters the talks were extensive but inconclusive, with a follow-up meeting scheduled for Friday morning. Asked whether the tariff hike had been blocked, Kim said it was not a matter of having stopped or stopped it, adding that no final conclusion had been reached. Kim said he made clear that Korea remains firmly committed to implementing agreed investments, including the special investment bill, and sought to persuade Washington not to reinstate the tariffs. Trade Minister Ya, ahead of his departure, said the goal of the visit is to assess both the U.S. administration's stance and congressional dynamics, while seeking a reasonable solution to prevent the tariff hike. He plans to explain Korea's political situation and discuss broader trade issues, including digital regulation. The diplomatic scramble comes as President Trump warns that U.S. tariffs could become much steeper, saying current measures were already generous and vital to national security. Speaking at a White House cabinet meeting, Trump argued tariffs have brought in hundreds of billions of dollars and insisted he has no intention of giving that up. As negotiations resume in Washington, this week is shaping up as a critical test, both a challenge and an opportunity for Seoul to prevent another escalation in Korea-U.S. trade tensions. Moon Hye-ryun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the United States has once again placed South Korea on its foreign exchange monitoring list. In its semi-annual report to Congress, the U.S. Treasury named South Korea among 10 economies, including China, Japan, and Germany, flagged for heightened attention over macroeconomic and exchange rate policies. South Korea was removed from the list in late 2023, but was put back on it in November 2024, and remains there under the latest assessment. In response, the Blue House said the Korean finance authorities will maintain close communication with the U.S. Treasury Department, adding that the U.S. report reaffirms the Korean currency's depreciation against the greenback is not in line with Korea's strong economic fundamentals. What's referred to as chipflation, the rising cost of computer chips, is spreading into everyday life. Higher component prices, fueled by the artificial intelligence boom, are driving up costs for consumers. Our Kim Junong reports.
This is Bae Jin-sung, who has spent 39 years running a custom PC store here in Yongsan, one of Seoul's major electronic hubs. These days, however, the price tags have long since disappeared from the front of his store. With prices jumping from one day to the next, electronics have effectively turned into goods sold at market price. He calls the situation heartbreaking.
One customer placed an order yesterday and even paid a deposit, but by the time we delivered it today,
Parts prices had jumped overnight. We have to keep our promise, so we sell at a loss. And it's painful that we can't offer customers lower prices.
Holding up a piece of legacy DDR4 memory, he put it simply, the price of one memory chip has risen to nearly the cost of an entire PC. This Micron DDR5 memory chip was about $70 3 months ago, but has now more than tripled to around $260. The ripple effects are quickly spreading to the finished goods market, raising the barrier to entry for consumers.
I came to upgrade my computer's RAM. It's been a long time since my last upgrade, but even for the same level of performance, prices are much higher now, so it's a bit of a burden financially.
The fixed contract price of PC DRAM rose sharply, reaching $9.30 by December last year, nearly 7 times higher than in March. The rise in parts prices is now being passed on to consumers, with the launch price of Samsung Electronics' new Galaxy Book 6 Pro coming close to double that of last year's model. Rising memory prices are now pushing up the cost of other key components, including SSDs and graphic cards. Tucked into a corner of Pe's shop, an NVIDIA graphics card tells the story. In less than a month, its price has climbed by more than $700. This latest turmoil stems from manufacturers prioritizing high-performance memory such as HBM, tightening the supply of lower-margin, widely used memory chips.
From a producer's standpoint, higher profits now lie in AI-related products. Lower margin, general-purpose DRAM has been pushed down the priority list, tightening supply. With AI opening up a new market, many expect this cycle to break from traditional patterns.
The AI boom is now in what many describe as a mega cycle. While the future remains uncertain, experts broadly agree that the surge is unlikely to show signs of easing in the near future. Kim Junong, Arirang News.
Interim CEO of Coupang, Rogers, will be questioned by police later today over the massive customer data breach incident. Rogers is scheduled to appear at the Seoul Metropolitan Police Agency at 2 p.m. after previously ignoring 2 summonses and leaving the country following a parliamentary hearing on the data leak. Police are investigating Coupang's handling of the breach, disputing the company's claim that only about 3,000 users' data was stored by the suspect. Authorities are also examining possible evidence destruction. Rogers is also accused of giving false testimony to Parliament after he said that Coupang had met with the suspect at the request of the National Intelligence Service. The NIS denies the claim. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump says Russia has agreed not to attack Ukrainian cities for a week due to extraordinary cold weather, though Moscow has not confirmed the deal. Ukraine has welcomed the announcement as diplomatic efforts continue, with the UAE emerging as a key mediator in talks aimed at easing nearly 4 years of war. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
U.S. President Donald Trump says Russian President Vladimir Putin has agreed to pause attacks on Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities for 1 week due to extreme winter weather. Speaking during a televised cabinet meeting in Washington on Thursday, Trump said he personally asked Putin to halt strikes as temperatures across Ukraine plunge. He said Putin agreed not to fire on Kyiv and surrounding towns for a week, citing what Trump described as extraordinary cold conditions.
And because of the cold, extreme cold, they have the same that we do, I personally asked President Putin not to fire on Kyiv and the cities and towns for a week during this. It's extraordinary. It's not just like cold, it's extraordinary cold, record-setting cold.
Russia has not confirmed any such agreement. Trump did not specify when the pause would take effect, but temperatures in Kyiv are forecast to drop sharply starting Thursday night, with lows expected to reach -24 degrees Celsius in the coming days. However, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky welcomed Trump's announcement, saying he expects Moscow to keep its word. Zelensky also thanked the United States for efforts to prevent further attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, which has been repeatedly targeted during the winter months since Russia's full-scale invasion began in 2022.
Thank you, America, for the efforts to halt strikes on energy. We hope the United States can make this happen.
Zelensky added that Ukraine remains in contact with international partners about possible ceasefire talks, emphasizing the need for effective formats and concrete results. Diplomatic efforts are also continuing elsewhere. Russian President Vladimir Putin met with United Arab Emirates President Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan in Moscow on Thursday, ahead of a second round of Ukraine-related talks scheduled to take place in Abu Dhabi. The UAE has emerged as a key mediator in the nearly 4-year war, having brokered multiple prisoner exchanges and recently hosted talks involving U.S., Russian, and Ukrainian officials on a U.S.-drafted proposal to end the fighting. A follow-up meeting is planned for Sunday, though it remains unclear whether U.S. officials will attend. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
As part of our special coverage on how Korea-France relations have evolved over the past 140 years, we explore how Korean food has not only made waves, but is changing the fine dining scenery through one top chef. Oh Soo-young tells us more.
This gourmet bibimbap, topped with Bordeaux caviar and fresh tuna, gives a taste of how Korean food in France has entered the structures of fine dining in the gastronomic capital. It's a creation by Korean-born French chef Pierre Sang-Boyer, who rose to fame on TV show Top Chef 15 years ago.
My first challenge is to be a chef in a capital of gastronomy, you know. Right. Was not easy, you know, because I think the taste of French people are quite different, but they're sharing the same value than Korea. Value to be together, value about supplier, value about diversity.
Adopted in France at the age of 7, Boyer later trained in classical French gastronomy. He worked in prestigious kitchens in Seoul, London and New York before establishing his own series of fine dining restaurants in Paris. One much-loved menu item is bibimbap, inspired by his Korean wife and their children's love for this iconic dish.
And how many bibimbaps are you selling per day?
And I have the chance to have 6 restaurants in Paris, and we're selling more than 4,000 bibimbap a day.
But this is no ordinary bibimbap.
So we decided to do like a bibimbap with the rice of Korea. We had some green lentils, some product from my place in Auvergne, and we had some eggs and some French twist. I mean, like lentils, we mix with some kimchi and use some raw ingredients and some seasonal product.
His classically French emphasis on ingredients and origin mirrors the chef's own life trajectory. His adoption in France and his community, and his evolving bond with Korean culture, now through his family, inspires his food. His personal touch made Korean flavors approachable to French diners at a time when Korean cuisine had little presence, according to acclaimed food and travel writer Catherine Down.
Pierre Sang-Boyer, who was a finalist in Top Chef in 2011, came up in a very classic French cadre, and then really sort of brought, I would say, some Korean flavors and techniques to the mainstream through being a finalist on Top Chef and then opening his own restaurant, which has really blended sort of classic French techniques, but with some of those Korean flavors that at the time were really new for the French palate and felt very exciting and innovative.
Korean cooking is now being absorbed into the logic of French gastronomy.
France loves hierarchy within a meal, so you have entrée, plat, cheese, dessert. There's sort of a rigid structure, but I think with a younger French customer who has traveled a little bit more, who's a little bit more open, we've seen more openness to different culinary techniques, more sort of sharing of food, more street food, openness to bolder flavors that are less traditionally French.
Methods like fermentation have gained particular traction, from sauces called chang and kimchi to makgeolli rice wine.
So we have a long-standing tradition of fermentation around charcuterie and cheese and wine, and so I think bringing in Korean fermentation techniques, there's a real respect there in terms of how you celebrate a product and sort of capture it through fermentation, how you represent a certain moment in time and layer some of those flavors.
As Seoul and Paris mark their 140th anniversary of bilateral relations, there's a growing appetite to explore more flavors combining the best of both countries. Oh Si-young, Arirang News, Paris.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. The European Union has designated Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization following its deadly crackdown on protests. EU foreign ministers reached a decision in Brussels on Thursday, adding the powerful IRGC to the bloc's terror list alongside groups such as Islamic State and Al-Qaeda. This follows the killings of thousands of protesters in Iran, a turning point that pushed previously cautious countries such as France and Italy to back the listing. The EU also sanctioned 15 individuals and 6 entities, targeting Iran's interior minister, senior prosecutors, Revolutionary Guard commanders, and agencies linked to censorship, surveillance, and drone and missile development. Tehran called the EU's move a, quote, major strategic mistake. The U.S. Senate blocked a critical government funding bill, pushing Washington to the brink of a partial shutdown as a fierce dispute over immigration enforcement intensified. Lawmakers failed to advance the budget on Thursday after Democrats refused to fund the Department of Homeland Security, demanding new limits on immigration and customs enforcement operations. The standoff follows the fatal shootings of 2 protesters by federal agents in Minneapolis, prompting Democrats to call for warrants, clear identification of officers, and tighter oversight of ICE. A procedural vote failed 45 to 55, and there will be partial shutdown from this weekend if no deal is reached by the Friday deadline. President Donald Trump said he wants to avoid a shutdown, adding his administration would work in a, quote, bipartisan way to do so. China has halved tariffs on British whiskey after direct talks between Chinese leader Xi Jinping and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer in Beijing. The move on Thursday will cut tariffs from the current 10% to 5% and is expected to generate £250 million in export gains over 5 years for the UK whiskey industry. Starmer raised the issue during meetings aimed at securing economic gains. China also agreed to tighten labeling rules on Scotch whiskey to help strengthen protection against counterfeiting. Beijing has also agreed to allow 30-day visa-free travel for British citizens, although no date for this has been set. Indian authorities have confirmed 2 cases of the deadly Nipah virus in the eastern state of West Bengal, triggering heightened surveillance across Asia. According to local officials and the World Health Organization, both cases are healthcare workers infected in late December. They were West Bengal's first cases in nearly 2 decades. The Nipah virus carries a fatality rate of up to 75%, but experts say human-to-human transmission remains limited and a global outbreak is unlikely. Countries including Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Nepal have tightened airport screening, while health agencies are monitoring the situation closely. Chu Ji-han, Arirang News.
The late January cold spell is still holding on, making for another frigid day. Cold wave alerts remain in place across the central regions, with afternoon highs also staying below freezing in most parts. But the good news is that this cold spell is nearing its end. Starting this weekend, temperatures will slowly rise, and by tomorrow afternoon, Seoul should climb back to above freezing territory. Meanwhile, dry conditions continue to worsen with little still to no recent precipitation, and strong winds along the coastal regions are raising the very high risk of wildfires. And this afternoon, Seoul will be getting up to just -2 degrees Celsius, Daegu topping out at 3 degrees under mostly sunny skies. By late Sunday night into Monday, rain or snow is expected across many parts of the country, and that could be a signal that winter's grip is finally starting to loosen.
That's all we have for today's noon edition of Arirang News. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Stay tuned.